Welcome back once again. And in this last short lecture, I'd like to summarize the Gaiawali et al. Article that really deals with disasters and crises. So, natural disasters are crises much like the coronavirus pandemic that we're all facing currently. And maintaining human livelihoods is important in the face of crisis or disaster, especially when we think about the recovery phase after these events. And that's really the reason why I signed this article, because I know that many of us are thinking about these ideas. We've been also for a long time thinking about the increasing prevalence of disasters in the Anthropocene, likely due to the ties with climate change. But then now we're facing this pandemic, and all of us are sort of wondering what's going to happen in the future and how will we recover from this. So post-crisis recovery presents this interesting window of opportunity or pitfall. So remember that a livelihood becomes sustainable when it can cope with stress and shocks and recover from them. It can enable or boost capabilities and assets, and it's also sustainable when it doesn't undermine the natural resource base. So a quick refresher, the sustainable livelihood approach recognizes a range of strengths or assets as defined by capital, right? And so these include natural capital, like land, produce, water, aquatic resources, trees, forest products, wildlife, wild foods, fibers, biodiversity, and environmental services. Financial capital includes things like savings, credit, debt, pensions, wages, right? And that's really critical right now when we're thinking about the coronavirus. Human capital, health, very important right now. We see all of those hearts on everyone's front doors and windows and mailboxes thanking the health industry for the work that they're doing, the tireless, threatening work that they're doing. Nutrition, education, knowledge, skills, capacity to work, capacity to adapt. These are all estimates of human capital. Where would we be without the healthcare workers today under COVID-19? Social capital. So that includes things like networks and connections, right? Relations of trust, understanding, support, informal, formal groups, shared values. Those all go into what social capital means, right? Behaviors, common rules, collective activity, those all go into social capital. Participation, leadership. And then lastly, physical capital. And that includes things like infrastructure, right? Roads, vehicles, shelter, buildings, water supply, sanitation, tools, technology, etc. So in that context, a post-crisis or post-disaster society can go in one of two directions. One that supports sustainable livelihoods, and another that leads towards rebuilding a community that remains vulnerable to future disturbance. So think about that for a moment in the context of COVID-19. Bill Gates warned Trump about the threat of a pandemic in 2015. He did not listen. He fired his pandemic team in January when COVID-19 was already spreading, and he cut funding to the CDC. In the recovery phase of this pandemic, we should learn from these lessons so we don't repeat this terrible fate we're experiencing now. This is one of the reasons why the United States has the most cases in the world, and also one of the reasons why the curve is not flattening. So building a post-disaster livelihoods is critical in the post-crisis scenario. Earning a living is paramount for victims to recover. Finance, like bailouts, are needed, and so are jobs. Shelter is really important, right? Lots of people have lost their jobs under COVID-19, and they're worried about having a home that they can continue to live in and make payments, pay their bills. This is a real scenario. So building resilient communities is really important. So in terms of the paper, here are some key lessons. It's important to link former livelihoods with post-disaster livelihoods in the reconstruction or recovery framework. If your town, for example, is laying on a high-risk landslide area or in a fire-prone area, a relocated area may be safe, but it may be far away from where you used to live before and the livelihoods you used to have. So there may be no linkage with earlier livelihoods. And this may be especially the case in places like post-wildfire Australia, where entire communities burned down and had to relocate. And it's actually part of the resilience building framework. So I just heard a talk last fall from some Australians where they redesigned their entire city to try to make it more resilient in the face of frequent fire. Empowering women is a critical component of the recovery mission to promote the post-disaster economy in general, but also to promote gender inequity, both in the developing world and also throughout the world in a post-COVID-19 society. I've said this many times, but training and capacity building are really important, and demonstrations of technical skills and income-generating activities are really important for improving livelihoods. So this means that skilled and unskilled training can work together to create disaster/crisis resilience in infrastructures, job opportunities in reconstruction and development projects. So it's more than just training skilled workers. It's about training all workers. And then fourth, community-based natural resources management leads to more sustainable resource use and adaptation of innovative and environmentally sound technologies. So that can lead to more diverse production and enhanced livelihoods in a reconstructing community. So this might not necessarily be super important to COVID-19, but we can remember at the same time that we've been hitting our environment hard for a long time, right? So we think about the planetary boundaries and how we, especially in the global north, have been surpassing those planetary boundaries and ravaging the earth and its natural resources for over a century. Resources management is vital, and this pandemic occurred in a place where people were coming into contact with closely related animals. We know it came from bats, but then it host switched to pangolins. But our human-environment relationship is very much connected to ecosystem health, and it's also very much connected to post-disaster, post-crisis human health. So with that, those are really the key points from this paper, and hopefully you've enjoyed the photo shoots and my voiceovers. Thanks so much.